order and ask for your approval of the minutes of the May 15th meeting.
So move.
Okay, any changes? Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, meetings are good. Let's talk a little bit about the library parking concerns. Sherry is here and Jeff Adams to bring us up to date on what's happening. I know some things have happened during this period of stay at home. So I'll turn it over to you, Sherry, to fill us in.
Okay, well, and Jeff is going to help me with this for sure. I think we did report that that we were able to come to a settlement agreement on the lawsuit, so that was a good thing. But we also are going to be addressing some items, including the parking. And so, Jeff, would you mind sort of filling people in on the date and all of that?
Sure, I'll offer a quick update. Most of you will recall that in reviewing the project, the expansion of the library at the HDC and the ZBA last year, 2 on-street handicap parking spaces were approved. Those are relatively large spaces. In working with the planning department and recommendations from Gene, they were designed to be relatively in the location of the 2 driveways across the street from Concord Academy between the back of the library and 151 Main. And those spaces are large enough for accessible parking vans that either have side or rear entrances. And curiously enough, because neither of those spaces are parking right now, it actually adds 1 space for downtown parking. It will require that one of the accessible spaces on the Concord Academy side that's currently close to the charging station will be relocated across the street adjacent to the library, but we think that's much safer and better. However, some of you will also recall that our early presentation to the HDC offered an on-library parking area that had 3 spaces for accessible parking, plus a space for the van parking. Now, that was not well received in the early presentations to the HDC, and the Historic Districts Commission generally prefers not to see asphalt parking on properties within the districts. Some of you will recall that at some meetings that's often come up on Lexington Road and that sort of thing. So they generally don't prefer to see those alternatives. However, early on, the library was hopeful that we would get 3 accessible parking spaces. So some of the memberships changed a little bit on the HDC, and we thought it was worth an opportunity of just going back to them. We need to go back for some other small changes in the approved plan. And we thought it might be a good idea to go back and make a slightly revised presentation for on-library parking for 3 rather than 4 spaces. And the 4th space that was intended to be for the library van. We've been able to come up with other strategies to park that overnight. So we'll be presenting on July 2nd to the HDC a similar plan to an early one that was vetted that has simply 3 accessible parking spaces on library property that has a little more landscaping around it to block the asphalt. And we're hopeful that the committee might support that and that you might agree it's a better alternative perhaps than the 2 on-street parking spaces. Any thoughts?
Well, that's very similar to the original design that we saw that we liked. And that gives 3 parking spaces that are close to the new accessible door. I mean, that seems like a much better solution. What do you think, members?
Are you talking about the ones that we discussed last meeting about the ones that are off street?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was a great idea.
Okay, I'm seeing nods all around from the committee members. So is there something we can do to help support this?
Well, there's a July 2nd HDC meeting. So not fully, it's presumably a Zoom meeting. And it's possible it would be helpful for the commission if you felt there was agreement to submit a letter in support of this design that we're asking for reconsideration, or to join the meeting and offer your words of wisdom.
Do you know what time that meeting will be, Jeff?
I don't, but I believe the HDC meetings are still in the evening. So we will try to check that and get back to you, Jean.
Okay. Janet?
If this has already been answered, then tell me, what was the original objection to this plan?
Well, I certainly won't speak to the HDC, but there was a lot of conversation, particularly from two members, about the general dislike of asphalt on historic
The asphalt problem. Okay, it was the asphalt.
That's my recollection, or
Yep.
was my impression.
Okay.
Is there
We
also,
Pardon me.
go ahead, Jeff.
We never took it to a vote, but we were pretty convinced it was not going to be approvable. So we kind of scrambled with the planning department who helped us. Elizabeth Hughes was very helpful in considering alternatives. So we currently have a plan that is approved for 2 accessible parking spaces right at the new entrance, which is approximately where the driveway to 151 Main Street is right now. So that's the approved plan, but we hope to go back and try for the 3 spaces we were hopeful for in the initial application.
I just wanted to mention, because you probably recall when I attended the meeting and Marsha Rasmussen was there as well.
Yeah.
We were talking about some of this. So at that time, I think Marsha had said that there could be a possibility also for a 3rd space in that cutout area. So we just want to mention that, in case, that it isn't approved, that we would certainly consider and work toward a third space.
Yeah, I think that, and members, please speak up, but I think our big concern about that, that scenario was that it meant people getting out on the traffic side of the car that's parked, or van or whatever. And especially if they had equipment there, they were pretty vulnerable to oncoming traffic. I realize it's a cutout, but it still didn't feel safe to a lot of the members here.
Right.
Jean, you raised a good issue. We did vet that with the engineers who designed it, who are certified in designing accessible parking spaces and whatnot. These are considered to be, quote, oversized, but you're still, regardless, getting out on a busy street. So your concern was recognized, and that's one of the reasons we're going back.
Good, thank you. Jennifer, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just briefly. So if the parking is, so there are lots of ways to create a surface other than asphalt. So I think that there's 2 layers of conversation. One is about having the parking on site and closer to ultimately the doors to the library. I think that's one issue. And then there's, is it asphalt or is it not asphalt is another issue. And so if asphalt is really the only hang up for the Historic Districts Commission, which I don't think that is the case, but if that is the only hang up, I think that there's a few options that could be taken up that are not asphalt, that have maybe more historical context and are still accessible under ADA compliance, with ADA compliance. So I think there's the question of whether or not you use asphalt, and we can put that aside. Personally, I just want to say out loud, I think it's much better to have the parking on site instead of on Main Street. One of the reasons I'm thinking, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that you can make a left-hand turn or a right-hand turn into the new parking driveway on site. That would be different than if you were parking along the street, in which way you could only come one direction down Main Street. In other words, if you were going the wrong way, you needed to get to the other side of the street, you'd have to go find a place to turn around and come back down so you could pull into one of those spots. Do you know if we'll be able to make a left-hand turn into the driveway to use the parking?
Jennifer, you've raised a number of good points. Answer the first question or the last question. Yes, I believe you'll be able to make a left-hand turn.
Great.
You raise a very good issue, and please point that out to the HDC about the convenience or perhaps inconvenience of the parallel parking plan, which does require, for all intents and purposes, that you be heading towards Concord Center to be able to safely access those two spaces.
Right.
And last, we did raise the issue of alternatives with the parking consultant and the engineers, and considered rusticated asphalt as well as permeable pavers that have grass growing. The permeable pavers didn't meet the accessibility code.
That's
And
right.
there was uncertainty about the gravel of whether that would also, rusticated asphalt, some of you know, is looks kind of like a gravel driveway. There's an emulsion that's poured over the asphalt, and then a gravel pea stone is rolled into the wet emulsion. There was uncertainty and a little bit of debate about whether that was an accessible service. And I think the building inspector weighed in, and I've forgotten his feedback on that. Are there other surfaces? You have some experience with this that should be
Yeah.
considered.
So what you're calling rusticated asphalt is actually a chip seal over asphalt.
For all intents and purposes.
And so and this is where it gets to be a gray area. And so when it comes to ADA compliance, the ADA no longer has a things like friction coefficients that they use to test materials to determine whether or not they meet ADA code. So what ends up happening is suppliers and vendors and manufacturers are left to self-evaluate whether their materials meet code. The code only says that it should be firm, stable, and slip resistant. And so that leaves a lot of gray area for manufacturers and material companies and installers to claim that a material is ADA compliant or not relative to this particular issue. So I do think that at the end of the day, there are really two sort of decision makers. One is going to be the building inspector, and then right behind the building inspector is really the Mass Architectural Access Board. So I think those are the two kind of, stop points there. And the tricky part again is that the code doesn't really outline very clearly for our inspectors what exactly meets code. So what ends up happening, it may not end up happening here, but it ends up happening across the board, is that inspectors get antsy. They don't want to be over zealous in accepting materials. And so usually what ends up happening is we get a little bit more conservative than we need to. So just to specifics here, in my experience in the design and construction industry, the chip seal can be applied with different thicknesses. And so obviously if you try to create a surface and it's soft and it's squishy and it rolls around and it's gravelly and it's a couple inches thick, that's not going to be effective. But if something is a 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch thick, it's not an issue at all. So in what I would recommend, if you end up going down this route, I would recommend doing what's called just do a mock-up, or find a place where it's been installed elsewhere and have our inspector go out and look at it and kick the tires and see for themselves what it looks like before you go and make decisions that cost you money.
Thank you. really helpful, and it actually is very similar to the somewhat nebulous and non-committal responses we've received. So thank you.
Right. So I'm sorry that it has to be that way. And at the end of the day, you know, there needs to be a balance between what works and what makes sense and what's realistic. So I think that that's really what everyone is. That's what we would hope and would support. I think on this committee, there are surfaces similar to the ones you've described elsewhere locally that are in public places that are accessible. So, and we've installed those surfaces on accessible projects. So that's not this project, other projects, but just so you know, it has been done and it can be done. So just one quick question. So the 3 spaces that would be on the property, would one of those be a van accessible space? In other words, would they be the full 9 feet by 19 feet with the 7-foot side aisle?
All 3 would be van accessible.
Van accessible. That's great. Excellent.
Good. All right, any other questions or comments about the library parking?
I missed when this HDC meeting is going to happen, and maybe we don't know yet.
July 2nd.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Jean.
I just checked the website and it's not posted yet, but the June 18th meeting happened at 7 p.m. So.
Okay, thank you, Carmen.
Thank you. Well, Jean, thank you for allowing us to update the committee, and consider writing a letter of support or certainly joining the July 2nd meeting and offering your thoughts.
Okay, well, I think I can probably make it if it's at 7 at night.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
And hopefully some of the other members can as well.
We're going to leave. Thank you.
Thank you so
And
much.
thank you
Bye.
for coming today.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
Enjoy the weather.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
So let me put it out to you all, the committee, about a letter. Would you like us to send a letter to the HDC basically saying that we're in support of the 3 on-site spaces? Will you feel comfortable if I draft something and send it to them?
Very.
Okay. All right. I'll put something together just short and simple that, you know, this was the original or similar to the original plan, which we very much liked, and that we congratulate the library for trying to come back to that as a better plan, much better plan than the on-street parking.
Excellent.
Right,
So-
because of the reasons that you cited, about the passengers getting out on the main road and the U-turns, and, you know, that this will be a safer plan.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I'll send something, and then I'll also plan to go to the meeting. And, you know, any of you as well.
Not to mention, though, that not just at the library, and this is, I think, relevant to our committee, to our commission, but not just at the library, it can be really difficult to integrate the needs of the ADA code and accessibility for all and the historic district's needs and desires and tenets of their mission. So it's not just here, it happens all across our state. And so I think as a comment, this would be a really great opportunity to do a really nice job of connecting the needs of the community in terms of their accessibility, as well as, you know, best meeting the goals of the Historic Districts Commission. So it's not an either or. It feels like this is just a really nice opportunity to put those 2 things together in a way that feels good and is representative of maybe how other projects could work.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're absolutely right, Jennifer. And I think, you know, as a commission, we've worked with some local projects to support their desire to sort of do what they need to do with the Historic District Commission and also be accessible. The Concord Academy building entrance comes to mind.
That's right.
So you are right. If you speak about that so eloquently, if you are able to attend that meeting, I think that you could really help to make that connection.
I'll try. On 7 o'clock on July 2nd. I have it in my calendar.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, I think if it's all right with you all, I would like to move the first item in the new business next, the access for deaf and hard of hearing individuals, particularly with town meetings and town events. Bob Andrews, who raised this issue, is here with us, and Carmen Reese, our town moderator, is here. So maybe we can do that discussion next and be mindful of their time. So Bob, do you want to share with us the concerns?
Yeah. First, I'll say that this is the second time that I've appeared before this commission, and it may not be the last time.
Okay, good.
My circumstances are very different now than when I came, the first time. I came, the first time because, individually, I had experienced a great deal of frustration when I attended public meetings in various milieus in Concord. Of course, we're not having public meetings in those milieus at this point, so that's certainly very, very different, but hopefully we'll get back to that at some point. This does raise a different kind of issue around accessibility. As a hard of hearing person, I can walk into a room and sit down, and I don't need a special parking place or anything of that sort. But if I'm really interested in what's going on in that meeting, and I have attended many meetings where I have really been very interested, and I can't hear what's happening, I don't consider that accessible.
No.
Now, I did come here, and part of what I would like to know today is whether there was follow-up on that appearance that I made here. I think it was 6 months or more ago. I know that you guys said that you were going to write a letter to the appropriate parties in the town, but I never heard anything about whether, in fact, that happened, and if so, what the response was made to it. Since that time, I've done quite a number of things. One thing that I've done is I've been writing a column for the Concord Journal about hearing issues. I've had 6 of them published. My goal has been to raise consciousness about hearing issues, not just about the issue of being able to hear in public meetings, but more generally, to encourage people to who are hard of hearing to come forward and to acknowledge that they have a problem that makes it difficult for them to navigate where others can navigate, with greater ease. If you will, I will talk a little bit about the other thing that I've done since then is I have started up a support group, for hearing impaired people at the Council on Aging. When I started that group, we were actually meeting at the Council on Aging. Since then, I have continued to have the meetings. We've done it by Zoom, and it's been an interesting experience because we've had to experiment with finding the best way to hear each other in a Zoom meeting. but in any case, the group, setting up the group was pretty successful in terms of the numbers of people who came forward. I didn't have any idea how many people would come forward. I think that there have been about 10, some that have come forward. We were, when we were having meetings over at the COA, it was different people would show up different times, but then there was a core of people who have, continued, who continued steadily. It's not everybody who attended the meetings over at Harvey Wheeler, continued to meet on Zoom, but I have been going forward with half a dozen people, all men for some reason, until a couple of weeks ago. And then since then, we've included a couple of more people, one of them living over at Newbury Court, and a woman who is, I'm not sure where she lives actually, but she's having considerable difficulty with her hearing. Well, it's been a good, support group, I think. People have appreciated it. We're starting to have outside speakers. But, there were there's a subgroup of the people in the support group who had enough concern about public meetings and about accessibility to public meetings, to want to, do some research about that and to initiate some, some communications with the town officials about it, as well as to touch base again with the Disabilities Commission. I thought a couple of those people would actually come with me tonight, but for various reasons they couldn't. So I'm here on my own, but do understand that there is a group, and we are actively pulling together a picture of what the problems are that have been experienced in various milieus, and what the town has done about it, and what we think, based on some, research, would be a good solution. We're talking about people who, some of whom are pretty much totally deaf, and some people who, who are hard of hearing, but but not deaf. So I gather both of those come within your scope. We've discovered recently that Kate Hodges, as the town manager, is named as the ADA link for the town. Just briefly, starting with the good news. The town meetings, which Carmen may have had some hand in, I don't know. Town meeting does make hearing assistive devices available when you go to town meeting. I've used them. There's a table outside the main meeting room, and here is Bob White coming into the meeting, who is also a member of our subgroup, who was working with me on identifying ways to make our experience better in public meetings. Hello, Bob.
Hello.
Okay, so I'm in the middle of just trying to say what we're doing. I was just starting to say what we've experienced in various milieus. The town meeting is a positive thing in that there are assistive devices available. And they're available at a table outside of the main meeting hall. The only concern I would raise about that at this point is that it's not always clear to people who have hearing issues that they're there. She may be pretty prominent, but people come milling through there and into the meeting, and some people just don't know, that there is that device available. Over at the Harvey Wheeler building, where there are, a higher percentage of, people coming to events who have hard of hearing issues. I talked with Ginger Carls, and there have been some assistive hearing devices purchased there as well. Unfortunately, some of the seniors who really do have trouble hearing don't admit that they have trouble hearing. And when you don't admit that you have trouble hearing, then you don't make an issue about not being able to hear in a meeting. Nonetheless, they are, I feel quite confident there. I mean, I think it's like maybe a third of the senior population has had some degree of hearing loss. Moving on to other milieus that are associated with the town, the select board.
Can I ask you to hold 1 second? I think Janet had a comment or a question about
Yeah,
the COA.
yeah. What was the question?
I am curious, Bob, if you reach out to school-age children.
If what?
If you reach out to school-age children.
No, I mean, this group, started at the COA, and it's a group of senior citizens. So we have not, we have not done that as yet. But it's a group that may go in various directions as we move ahead. I would like to talk about some of the other milieus, the select board room. I've gone to many meetings in the select board room where I've been really unable to hear. There are some assistive hearing devices in a closet there, but nobody running the meetings generally knows that either that they're there, or if they do know that they're there, how they work. So I have not been able to get any help, with being able to hear better. I can't, and it's a group of people, around a table where there are microphones, but the microphones are, as I understand it, there so that there can be a record of the meeting, not so that people who are having trouble hearing can hear. There's a similar situation over on Kais Road, in the meeting room on Kais Road. People talk low, and there are no assistive hearing devices there, or if there are, they're hidden away so that you don't know that they're there. That's the hearing room, the big hearing room at the townhouse. It is a nightmare. I mean, it is truly a nightmare, and I don't just mean for people who have trouble hearing because they are partially deaf. I mean people who have normal hearing, and if the people who have normal hearing can't hear because the acoustics are so terrible there, and the sound system is so terrible, I mean, is that a public meeting? I don't think so. So that would be a major, concern on my part, and going on from there. Yeah.
Can I just comment on that, Bob? I completely agree with you. And it turns out that right before COVID, the town manager had ordered some carpets for that hearing room. I personally have a terrible time hearing in that room. I know exactly what you're talking about. Unfortunately, we have not been able to test the carpets because we haven't been open. Hopefully they will help to some extent. And then we may have to take further steps. But we're very aware of the problem. You're right, nobody can hear in that room. It is a real big problem.
So it's, and over at the Council on Aging at Harvey Wheeler, in the big auditorium, I started out, saying that there are some hearing assistive devices that are available there, but people don't necessarily use them, and the acoustics there are also quite bad. So and
Could I,
There are
could
no
I-
special assistive devices in the clock tower room where a lot of meetings are held. It's very, very uneven, really sort of an acoustic nightmare in some places, and just extremely challenging in others. And it doesn't seem like there's an overall effort, that's gone very far at this point. I am trying to open some dialogue with Kate Hodges about it. And, initially, although she's not in her office nowadays, she responded in a positive kind of way. She said she'd go over to the Council on Aging and talk to Ginger Carls about and what the situation is over there. And I said, that's really not a place where the worst problems are. So why don't we just wait until this group manages to get its research together about what is happening and can come forward with some real recommendation.
yeah, let's let Carmen comment. I know my recollection is there's a special device, a ring in the select board room, but Carmen, you have the floor. You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Bob, I have a question for you. We have instituted in the last couple of years the closed captioning, which is done at town meeting, which is done by a stenographer live. She is amazing. I don't know how she does it.
Yeah.
I wonder whether you have come to town meeting and used that and found it helpful?
Well, I think the closed captioning is definitely helpful. I'd like to be able to, to hear.
I understand. It's not a substitute. Sometimes my husband is quite hard of hearing as well. So I know these frustrations. I know how hard it is. Sometimes I think it's really helpful if you are, your eyes can help you fill in some of what you're missing when you're hearing, if you're reading and listening.
Yes.
So it can be a help. I can tell you that one of the solutions that we have found, it's very prevalently used in Europe. It's called a T-coil.
Yes.
And a hearing loop. And we actually installed one in our office for my husband in our large conference room. And what it is you have microphones on the table that capture people's voices.
Yeah.
And then there's a transmitter that sends that signal from the microphones to an antenna loop that's in the room. And then my husband he changed his hearing aids to be a T-coil hearing aid so that you can switch them onto the hearing loop, and then the sound goes from the microphone directly into his hearing aids, and it is miraculous. And the first place that we went to look at it before we installed it in our office was at Boston City Hall in the hearing room there. Which is this huge brick cavernous room where I think it would be hopeless to hear anything if you were hard of hearing. They installed one of them there, and it's a huge room, and someone showed it to us, and we turned it on, and I walked around the room, and my husband could hear me from every corner. It was great. So that caused us to buy it. Now they're not
cheap.
They're not cheap, and it only works for people with T-coil hearing aids, which are also not cheap. On the other hand, I think that you can have the around the neck devices, which you could loan to people so that if you didn't have the T-coil hearing aids, if there was a hearing loop, you could have the around the neck thing. And that actually was my second question for you. My husband hates the hearing assistant devices that are RFD, the ones like if you go to the movie theater, and he says they're useless. They just, and sometimes they will do things like connect you with the wrong movie. I mean, it's just, they're unbelievably terrible and frustrating. So he doesn't bother with them.
Well, I pretty much dislike them too. You know, I find them better than nothing.
Yeah. The other place that I think in our country that these are, that hearing loops are in much greater use is in churches, in houses of worship. And they've just been way ahead of public facilities in making that possible for their hearing impaired constituents, for their members, their congregants.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think that the hearing loop is so far superior to other methods that are out there. Janet mentioned school age kids. I mean, in Europe, they use these in schools. You can buy a subway ticket and there's a little thing in the window in the subway, and you know if the little symbol is there that you could turn your T-coil on and you're going to be able to hear the guy in the little booth. And it's just so much better. We're so far behind. Yeah, Jennifer. Oh, sorry, I'm not the chair.
No, that's
Yeah.
okay. I want to see if there's a way though that we can incorporate like what our commission can do with the work that Bob is doing with this really amazing group. So first of all, Bob, thank you so much for like organizing this group of people and encouraging them to come together. I think it's amazing. I hope you keep it up, and I hope it gets bigger, and I hope that you can attract more people to be open and seek assistance where they need assistance around their hearing loss. I think it's totally commendable. I'm so excited that you're doing this. So that's the first thing. So what I'm hearing though is that there's really there's 3 factors at play at minimum in any given space.
Yeah.
There's the physical conditions, whether
Yeah.
there's carpet, whether there's windows, a high ceiling, right? So there's the physical conditions.
Yeah.
There's the equipment that might or might not be available to help with the assistance of listening. And that's like the public equipment, like that's the borrowed equipment. And then there's the user and the user's own equipment and the user's own ability to manage equipment. So we have like 3 very different sort of pieces to the puzzle. So as a commission, I think what would be helpful is for us to know where do an inventory, like in each of the spaces, what are the existing options that are there? Yeah. And then I think it would be really great to understand what are the recommendations, because Carmen's point about the loop is really well taken, and maybe we could find a way to advocate for installing a loop system in a place where it doesn't exist in town right now. So I think understanding like an inventory, like these are all the places that the meetings happen. These are all the existing pieces of listening equipment that we have. We may have equipment, as you say, people don't even know how to operate. And so if we could get training for the people who need to know, that would be helpful. And then I think then there's the third thing that we can do as a commission, which is to collate that information so that the people that you're working with know or have a place to go to find out what their options are in a given meeting space before they go. And I think that's one of the things that would be most helpful. Is we may not be able to fix the carpet everywhere or install a T-loop everywhere, or even provide the best and greatest listening devices everywhere, but at the very least, we can help people be prepared for what is there so that they can come with the best strategy that works for them.
Yeah. Well, our group really is looking at the loops. You know, we know about the loops, and we understand that they have extremely good, sound. As you say, it doesn't go directly to hearing aids unless you happen to have hearing aids with with that telecoil. But there is another device. We're looking at that. We do want to do an inventory such as you're talking about, and we will, I think, in the next month or two, or continue to. We're aiming at a report, that we can bring to this commission, or that we can take to Kate Hodges, and it will say, these are the difficulties that are experienced in these different places. These are some of the options for how it could be dealt with. This is what we found out about it, what it costs. What are you going to do?
Mhm. I think
I would like to know what happened after I came to the commission before.
So Bob, I will tell you, I will need to go back through my records from before we kind of closed down due to COVID and see if actually a letter was written. That would have been 5 months ago. So let me take a look.
My impression is that a letter was written, but I never heard anything about that.
Yeah, let me go back
what
through.
the response was.
I'd be happy to do that, and I can send you an email or a copy if a letter was written.
I would appreciate that, because
Yeah.
we really want to know, what the level of awareness is of town officials. I mean, I've heard quite a bit from Carmen and Terry, who both really clearly understand the issue. But does Kate Hodges, and we're just starting a dialogue with her. Do other people? I don't know. So anything you can do to help, fill us in on, what the thinking is among the town officials about this issue and what they have in mind to do about it would be appreciated.
Okay, Terry?
Actually, Bob, I have to say that I am really ignorant about these issues, and I really thank you for bringing them to our attention. And I love Jennifer's idea about collating and educating people. I think when I do my liaison report, I will bring in some of these ideas. For example, I think you said 1/3 of all adults are going to experience some hearing loss. So I think we can all get better educated. It seems like some in the group here are very educated, but I am not, and I suspect that many are not. So your inventory of our meeting rooms and costs and suggestions and ideas for helping people who can't afford expensive devices, and all of those suggestions are going to be much appreciated.
Good. Thank you. Could I ask Bob White, who's joined me here, whether you have anything that you'd like to add to this discussion, Bob?
No, I have a hearing problem myself, which is why I got involved, and I can only second the comments about the hearing room in Town Hall. And I think that it would be great if while they're laying the carpet, they could put an induction loop underneath it, but that might not be something that's in the budget. I listened to everything you say, and I think you're on target, understanding where we are with our group and what we want to accomplish. And yeah, we do have the task of inventorying each facility and recommending what we would think could solve any problem for people who have hearing problems.
Yeah, why don't you wait?
Yeah, if you as your group puts together that inventory, and if you can get us a copy of that or your report when you finish it, I'm sure this commission would be willing to support some better access for people who have hearing loss.
Will definitely come to you.
That's really part of our charge. Carmen, did you have a comment?
Two things. One is another of the hearing spaces in town that's particularly tough is at Ripley, where the school committee has its meetings. And so I wouldn't neglect that space in your inventory. Among other things, they kind of have a choice. You can either roast in there or they turn on the air conditioning and it makes such a racket that it's even harder to hear, and the room's a weird shape. There's a lot of things that are hard in there. So that's one space to look at. The other thing that just occurred to me in listening to you and to Bob and Bob talking this evening is I wonder whether there's anything we could do to piggyback on the broadcasting, the simultaneous broadcasting that is happening of some meetings. I know sometimes there can be a little delay and that can be like a little annoying, but it might well be that if you brought with you a device with headphones that would allow you to tune into, maybe it's your iPad and you tune into the website where things are being broadcast live, or for town meeting, the radio station that is always broadcasting live, and that would be something you could put directly into your ears. Whether or not you had hearing aids. So it just occurs to me that that might be a thing that's worth exploring.
Good idea. I'll just add that, one of my frustrations in addition to the public meetings has been listening to television. It's very hard to do that. I just recently acquired some headphones that was suggested by one of the other members of the group. They're not really necessarily for hearing impaired people, but they work extremely well. Mm-hmm. There's a transmitter that's plugged into the back of the the cable box or the TV, and brings the sound directly to your ears, and you have individual control over the volume, and it only cost $119, I think it was, from Best Buy.
Well, that sounds like a good solution.
Yeah.
And Carmen, I think your idea about people bringing a device with them and tuning in with some headphones until something more can be put into place might be a great option for people.
So my husband is an excellent guinea pig on these things, and I think maybe we will work on that this year. And I just want to mention, I want to apologize in advance to everybody on how hard town meeting's going to be this year, because it's going to be outside and it's going to be in the Bob White fields, and there is road noise from Route 2. And we're going to do our best to counteract it with loudspeakers. And I was just thinking as you were talking whether there's any way that the closed captioning is going to be visible if we're doing this meeting in the daytime, and if people are socially distant in their chairs, so they're maybe too far away to read it. So we're going to have some real challenges, and actually I'd love to be on your agenda, Jean, to come back and talk with you about the logistics for town meeting and get the commission's thoughts on things that we should be particularly attentive to. Probably be good for me to come after we've begun to really put the logistics together, so I can tell you what we're thinking and you can help us tweak it.
Great. So perhaps an August meeting?
Yes.
Is that too late?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Carmen,
Well,
will the next town meeting be broadcast on the radio like
Yes.
all of our others? So your point earlier about the possibility of being able to tune into the radio broadcasts while you're live at the event would be a great solution for being able to improve the hearing of what's going on, rather than coming over the air, hearing it through headphones, right?
Right.
That would work. So again, I just to put a point on this, I don't know if people know even how to tune into the radio station, like where to find it, or that's even an option. So I think just collecting this information, I think, is really going to be key, so that we can make sure people have the information. They may want it, they just don't know where it is.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think maybe we do a little experiment this year and we see if it works.
I think it's a great
Yeah.
idea.
And I know you're talking about publishing printed materials for people to have.
Yes.
So maybe that's something that could be prominent at the beginning of some of that material. Or both for people who are hard of hearing and people who aren't, who want a little better clarity.
Right. Right. Good thought.
Well, Bob and Bob, thank you very much for coming tonight and for the work that you're doing. This is great. It's such it's a group that can be overlooked sometimes, and we really are concerned about accessibility in all areas for the town. So please be in touch with us as you work to develop your inventory and your report, and we'd love to see that. We'd love to have you back when you've got that completed and have more discussion.
Well, thank you very much for listening to us
Yeah,
Thank you.
and responding.
Okay. All right. So let's go back up to old business.
And I will sign off at this point.
Leaving.
Okay. All right.
And Jean, I think
Thank you for coming.
you don't need me for anything else on your agenda, do you?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. I'm going to sign off too, and thank you very much. I really appreciate being included in this discussion.
Yeah, thank you. It was great to have you, Carmen.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So for those of you who are newer members to this commission, Carmen knows the group very well. She was our very first select board liaison when she was on the select board. So she's well aware of some of the things that we do and some of the issues that we have worked on. So we have on the agenda again a further discussion about the impact of COVID-19 and the idea of a face mask required zone. And I wanted to, put that out for more discussion. Terry, if you're still with us, can you share with us the comments or generally the comments that Mary Beth made to the select board and their suggestions from that? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
Remind me, Mary Beth.
So Mary Beth came to a select board meeting in May and brought the issue to the select board, the concern particularly with the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, that athletes in particular, people who were biking or running, were not, by and large, were not wearing masks. And I see that on the streets as well. And that for people, particularly folks who use wheelchairs or ambulate with devices or more slowly, that the idea of being able to step aside, to be able to have enough social distance, isn't very workable for them, especially if someone comes up from behind.
Right, I do remember now, but I don't remember that anything was really decided about it. In fact, did you folks talk with the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail people? Are on their agenda coming up?
We have not had an in-depth discussion with them. I did mention it to John Soden, who's the chair, at the chair breakfast this week, that I felt it'd be useful for he and I, or maybe for the two groups, to get together and talk.
I think that's a great idea. I don't think that the select board can solve this. I think if after your two groups meet, I mean, I'd be happy to come also if you want me to. I'm liaison for them as well. But maybe what'll come out of it are some recommendations that we do need help from Kate or Stephen or Marcia or somebody. But at this point, I'm not sure what the Bruce Freeman people know about it, what they think about it.
Mhm.
So I think a joint meeting or a subcommittee would be really good.
Okay. Well, I would be happy to reach out to John. I can do that one day next week and see if they're willing to do either a combined meeting or a few of them and a few of us get together. Maybe that's not really allowed with the open meeting law.
That's fine. If you have less than a quorum and they have less than a quorum, I mean, if you're going to start having lots of meetings, we might have to name it a subcommittee and post it. If you're just going to have one or two people from here and one or two people from there meet once or twice, then you know, it's not a formal subcommittee. You're okay. I think, and I'd be happy to attend. So keep me in the loop.
Okay. All right. So I'll take that step. Are there other things you all would like to see done sooner about that or in addition?
Jean, I thought when I remember Mary Beth's comments pretty clearly, and I think she comes from a perspective that most people don't consider when they think of why they need to wear masks. And even, you know, I think, like Terry's saying, I don't think that this is something necessarily that the select board can solve. I don't think it's even something the rail trail people can solve. There's people on the rail trail that come from well outside of Concord and just pass through. But what I do think as a commission in this time, I think maybe the thing to do is to go on record that this is an important aspect of keeping Concord citizens safe, and particularly protecting the civil rights of the people in Concord who have disabilities and may not be able to, no fault of their own, be able to protect themselves the same way that someone who's more able could. So I don't know whether it's just either a letter or maybe an opinion piece at the Concord Journal, or whether we're lobbying for our town manager to include this as a comment in his next COVID-19 update to the town. Bonnie?
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the Board of Health is the body that's mandated to make Concord safe, make the town safe. It's the Board of Health. So perhaps we should reach out to the Board of Health to say, we see this as a problem, because I know they're going around to all the stores and checking for social distancing and screens. And maybe there's a sign that can be put up as people enter Concord or from both sides saying you're expected to wear a mask on the rail trail, just as an idea about, you know, jurisdictions.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Bonnie. Yeah, Janet.
This is slightly off the topic, but it has to do with what Mary Beth was saying. Didn't she also have an issue with people not respecting the space that she needs for her wheelchair?
Yes.
That she can't move for them.
Right.
Yeah, she can't just
There's also that issue.
move to the side, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we might want to include the Board of Health and also maybe the planning, somebody from planning, because I think the signage on the trail itself would be very effective, more than just all the citizens or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, I think in a lot of ways it's a public health education issue that, you know, people, I think still are feeling that I wear a mask to protect myself versus, you know, I wear a mask to protect everyone else around me, and they respectfully wear masks to protect me. So, you know, there's that aspect. Certainly if we did something in the journal, that could be a part of it. And then the other thing that I see and I read about is, you know, the people that are like, I'm not wearing a mask. I don't want to do that. I just don't.
I think
And
we
it's
said,
my right to not wear a mask.
I see it all the time on my sidewalk right in front of my house.
Yeah, I do too.
I was in the store, I was in the Crosby's and I was trying to back away from a woman who was so close to me. I had my mask on and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing the distance." And she's like, "We're far enough away." I mean, really disrespectful.
Mm.
So it's not just the rail trail, you know, but
Right.
I feel bad,
So-
especially for people who can't back away.
Right. Yeah.
So it seems like the more I'm thinking about this, that we might need to get this issue on, say, maybe a Board of Health meeting or a rail trail meeting or a planning board meeting. And then all the folks that we've been, because you're talking about a lot of different groups now, Health, Commission on Disabilities, Rail Trail. Now, if you're talking about other trails, now you might be involving the NRC. So maybe, Jean, if you and talk and maybe talk with the Board of Health Chair, Ray Considine, and see if you can figure out what's the most best venue to get this on someone's agenda, and then everyone show up to talk about this topic, maybe including Mary Beth.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. Well, I'll reach out to John and to the Board of Health, and I'll explore the idea of having a combined meeting just to talk about this and ideas that either of those entities might have, and then, you know, we can go from there. It's difficult and it's sticky. It's also something that's exceedingly hard to enforce, which is part of why people can be like, I just don't want to do it. No, you know, nothing's going to happen. I'm healthy. You know, so yeah. All right, I'll look into that and get back to you guys. So the last piece of new business that I have on, or I guess we touched base on it last month, is the chairperson for FY21. I've been chairing this commission since it started, and I'm happy to do that. But I'm also very happy to step down if one of you would like to take on the chairperson. I leave that up for discussion, and you certainly won't hurt my feelings if you're like, you know what, it's time for you to move on, Jean. Yeah, Janet.
I don't think that time is yet.
How do we, I'm not very good with this formal meeting process. Do we say like, I motion for Jean to continue?
I move that Jean Goldsberry continue for another session, for another, what is it called? Term, thank you, for another term.
I would second.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right.
I just want to say thank you so much for being the chair for this long. You and I have served on this committee together from the very beginning, when it was still a committee and not a commission. Just like today, just, you know, explains a lot of action does get sort of lands on your lap as the chair, writing letters, reaching out, following through, and you always do. And your leadership on this committee is on this commission is part of why it's so successful. So if you are willing to continue in this role, I'm very, very grateful. And I know that many people who are supported in the town of Concord by this Disability Commission would be very grateful as well.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. That's really kind. I enjoy being on the commission and chairing it. It is a little extra work, but that's okay. you know, I have a huge passion for people with disabilities of all kinds. It's been certainly my life's work, but also family members, you know, myself as I get older. I'm in that older adult category now, and which is why I'm working from my kitchen. And so it's very near and dear to my heart. So thank you. Thank you.
Before we close out, I have another question about how I bring up an agenda item.
Sure. Well, we're in the correspondence and miscellaneous section, so that would be it.
Okay. So there's this forum, it's called Rethinking the Thoreau Depot Business District. And I don't know if we've touched on that before, but I just felt like possibly we might want to get involved before they get too far along to bring up any issues that might be more complicated later. They have
Would you, Bonnie, would you say that again? What is the topic?
Sorry, air conditioning on. It's the Thoreau Depot Business District.
Oh yeah, okay.
The Thoreau Depot. So it's for the planning board, and they're having a forum to collect information and report back. And so they're having their second planning forum on June 23rd. And, you know, just to prevent issues later, I thought we might want to get involved somehow.
So smart.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. I know, you know, we've been concerned about the accessibility for the train.
Yeah.
There, and you know, we took it all the way to the head of the MBTA, and when Corey Atkins was state rep, she was very supportive around that. But you know, it ended up being one of these, well, we've got this big 10-year master plan, and it's somewhere in like year 8 or 9 or something.
Yeah. To the first forum meeting, and that's the first thing I said in the breakout groups is if you're doing all this work, now's the time to make the train station a level boarding platform.
Right, exactly.
Or at least a portion of it.
Right. And I think there is a less expensive option for the MBTA that would be a metal kind of platform, is my understanding of it. But they have not been willing to consider that. Now, whether, you know, a little bit of time has passed, maybe they would be in a position to consider that more strongly at this point. So
if I go to this meeting, how, and I want to bring that concern up, I bring it up as a private individual.
Oh, I think you
speak for the board, right?
Well, you certainly can bring it up as I am a member of the Commission on Disability, and this is, you know, and we discussed concerns about this at our last meeting.
Yeah, I'm also concerned about walkability over the crossing the train track is very dangerous. Yeah, there's a lot. A lot.
Yeah, there's a lot, and there's the you know, the parking lot between the retail area and the ice cream shop that has tons of kids running around in it, you're right up against the train tracks. That doesn't seem very safe to me for children or teens or anybody really. But good, I'm really glad. So Bonnie, you will be able to be there?
Yes.
Wonderful.
And if you want, anybody else wants to go, you can go to the town website and find the time. It's next Tuesday at 7.
Great, thank you.
That's the same night as the library, okay.
Oh yeah.
Oh, the HDC.
Oh, HDC.
No, June 23rd.
Oh, the library, sorry.
June 23rd.
Right, the HDC is July 2nd.
Following week.
So, yeah, good. All right. Well, thank you, Bonnie. That is a really important issue. And you're right, if we can get into the discussion in the beginning stage instead of afterwards, that's kind of a direction we've been trying to go. And I know that Lloyd's connections with the Concord Chamber was really to try to help us do that for businesses so that we can be a resource and help businesses before they make decisions that then they're going to have to go back and fix later. And, you know, I feel like we are a group that's been very reasonable and tries to hit that balance between what will provide the best accessibility for the most people and not be, you know, so rigid that there couldn't be that extra inch, is it, at the School of Philosophy? So, you know, we've been willing to work
It was
with
an inch and a half. Yeah.
inch and a half. Yeah. So that's really where I think that's kind of our sweet spot is to try to work it out so that there is good accessibility for everyone, but it's not so rigid that it's completely undoable.
If I may make a comment about that, Jean, I
Yeah.
really think that you as the chair and this whole commission have done a really, really excellent job of hitting that sweet spot. I know from experience, I've worked with other commissions on disabilities in other towns, and they become rigid and get embattled in something, and nothing gets done that way. People just find a lot of disagreement and ugliness, and you guys have been much more effective, and I'm really glad that you're willing to continue as chair. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Terry. Okay, any other comments, issues, things we need to talk about tonight? I'm sorry we ran over for this meeting, but we'll try to keep it closer to that hour time. So is a Thursday, 5 o'clock, a workable time for most of you guys if I try to schedule something in July? Typically, we don't meet in July and August, but I think given that we had a couple of months where we couldn't meet and there are several important things going on, it's behooves us to continue.
I think we have to stay on top of the library things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and now Thoreau Business District and the whole mask issue and so forth. So, all right, I'll work with Jeremy and see if we can schedule something in the middle of July. By then, we will have heard what the HDC has to say, and we'll know some more info about Thoreau Business District, and hopefully I will have contacted or figured out something with John and the Board of Health to get us together. So thank you all. Thank you all very much for coming and your attention and your time tonight.
Thank you.
I'll see you in a month, maybe before.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.